Hello, welcome to Working Lunch, the SLO Chamber's weekly series where we get to sit down with leaders in our community and bring back some of that connection we've been missing during these turbulent times, and maybe get to learn some new things about the people we interact with or maybe have never met before. I'm Jim D'Antona, President and CEO of the SLO Chamber, and today you're going to be a part of my conversation with Chris Richardson, President of Richardson Properties. With nearly 20 years of real estate sales and leasing experience spanning both residential and commercial markets, Chris leads the Richardson property teams on the Central Coast and in Southern California. Highly engaged in our community, Chris has lent his expertise to numerous nonprofits, including as a board member for that amazing group known as the SLO Chamber of Commerce, EVC, and Transitions Mental Health Association. And he's helped shape our community through service on the City of SLO's Land Use and Circulation Element Update Task Force. Chris has been inducted into Christie's International Real Estate Master Circle for outstanding real estate performance and been recognized by the Pacific Coast Business Times in their 40 under 40. I'm so looking forward to our conversation about residential and commercial trends, his perspective on the future community, and getting to know a little bit more about what first drew him to SLO in the industry. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Jim. Thrilled to be here with you today.
So let's just kind of get started with the way we always do. Where are we zooming in from today and kind of what's on the lunch menu?
From home, of course, working from home here in San Luis Obispo on a warm day. And I think we have lunch from Taste coming soon. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. Thank you for making that all happen.
Always our pleasure. And Taste, that's a great choice. Always love that. So let's start kind of from the beginning. You've most of your life, I think, has been here in SLO, but not all of it. What initially kind of brought you to SLO?
Well, you know, my mom's family somehow had found the Central Coast, I think in the late 60s or 70s. We were living in Southern California in the South Bay, Torrance, Redondo Beach area. And my parents decided to sort of get us out of LA and move us up here. And it was around like 1985, right after the Olympics. And I remember getting here I think it was in 4th or 5th grade and kind of looking around going, where the heck are we? But quickly fell in love with it, you know, was a SLO High grad, Laguna Junior High, SLO High, went away to Santa Barbara City College, came back and finished at Cal Poly. And then after Cal Poly, left for about 4 years, went to grad school back down in Southern California, worked in LA for 3 years and San Francisco for a year, and then was fortunate enough to move back here in 2002. And that's when I, you know, partnered with my dad in the real estate business, and we've been working on that and growing it ever since.
Well, so an interesting thing you talked about there is there was this kind of went away and came back. I'm starting to notice that trend in some of the folks I get to know more around the community. Is that something like you don't appreciate exactly what you have here until maybe you get away for a little while?
I think so. I mean, I think when you grow up here, you know it's a special place, but I think it takes leaving and experiencing other places, whether it's throughout the state or nation, or even internationally. I think, you know, going away and then having some context outside of San Luis Obispo gives you even more of an appreciation for the quality of life that we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone obviously who didn't get to experience it early, except through visitor, it is a special place. So we're obviously so lucky to have you here. So let's talk about a little bit what you started there. Was Richardson Properties is a kind of a family business. Can you share some of that company history? Did you always want to be in real estate, or was there a different plan there?
I don't know if I knew I always wanted to be. My dad has been in the business for probably 45 years. And so I grew up around the business. I would go to meetings when I was very young and just kind of sit there and try and absorb what the heck was going on. And over the years, you know, it was intriguing and interesting. So I always had an interest in it. Of course, I got my license at 18. I worked with my dad through college, and that was a great experience. He had run a larger real estate organization down in Southern California before we moved up here. And when he moved up here, his focus was really to find landowners that were interested in selling, that had land that had development potential, and then pairing that up and brokering that sale to a land developer, home builder, and then staying on and doing the sales of what they built. Typically it was homes. Sometimes we worked on some commercial projects too. So that was a part of the business I was around during college and grew up learning, within. And then after going away and coming back, as I mentioned earlier, we were still focused on that part of the real estate market here on the Central Coast, but we also, began growing into more of a traditional real estate firm as well. And that's kind of how we've evolved today. But we still have this in our DNA and a segment of our business that, loves to find the land and the development opportunities and pair that up with the right developer to bring, new homes to our community.
Well, yeah, when you look at your team, it's evolved. Obviously, you're quite a large team now, and not only in this area, you're in multiple locations. How do you kind of keep that, as you were talking about a little bit about what you want to do and what you have to do, but the culture and core values with such a, kind of distributed team?
Well, on the core value topic when I was on the chamber board, Lynn Bittinger did a consulting project and worked with the chamber board and a committee to really articulate and define the chamber's core values at that time. And I was just thoroughly impressed with Lynn. We had done some work with her and her firm previously. And so about 5 or 6 years ago, we engaged her, maybe not quite that long ago, we had quite a bit of growth and we wanted to kind of understand why, what's the why behind this growth. And Lynn helped us really work through who we were, what our culture was all about, and really articulate our core values. And it was a fun process. We engaged a handful of our real estate professionals and our staff and put a little committee together and worked on it. It was probably a 4 or 6 month project, an endeavor that we went down with Lynn. And out of it came a clarity and articulation of our core values. And we have them in all of our, on our website and our listing presentation. And it's always interesting to me. Sometimes I wonder when we're meeting with potential clients if that, resonates with them. But somewhat to my surprise, it often does. And they really kind of want to stop and talk about those. And I think they're really kind of the personality traits of your company and your culture. And so it was fun to have the growth. It was fun to kind of pause and look at it and articulate them. And so it's kind of our northern light.
Well, it's one of those things that is so interesting because there's, I think more and more companies are adopting that they need a kind of cultural core values, but there's a group who's like, oh, that's craziness. We don't need to necessarily do that. But kind of listening to you talk, it sounds like those core values help you, setting that for your company actually helps your company do business. Is that kind of what you feel like?
Yeah, I think culture is, to me, one of the most important things in any organization. And so I think it's a, they're the DNA of your, of who you are and what your culture is like. The chamber has been such an amazing organization to me personally and in my personal and professional development. My experience on the economic development committee for a couple of years, and then the board, and then on executive committee. And it was just, it's a fantastic group year in and year out. Amazing people, super, super smart. All have an affection and a love for the Central Coast. And so that's kind of the bond that we all have, and a lot of different perspectives, but I always appreciate how at those meetings, you really look at both sides. And I always say you would go into them with maybe an opinion, and then you hear the other side and it kind of moves you. And I think that that's healthy. And during these times we're in where we don't get those interactions other than in Zoom, I think, that can kind of polarize some things. Getting that honest conversation, being open to hearing the other side. And the chamber, does a great job with that on the committees and at the board level. And a handful of years ago, Ermina Kareem, your predecessor, put a group together. I think Chris Yetter, started the process or brought it to the table, and a group of us would go to the World Business Forum in New York. And there's just some incredibly amazing people that speak at this event. And the first year I went, there was a guy named Simon Sinek that spoke. And he talked about leadership. And I had always thought leadership was like, you're either Michael Jordan, you're born with it, or you're not. And I didn't think I was Michael Jordan by any stretch as a leader. So I still don't maybe, but Simon's whole thing that just resonated and kind of changed my whole perspective. And this is about 5 years ago when we did this core value exercise. We also launched another business around the same time. And it's all about creating a culture where people feel safe, supported, appreciated. And, those are all can be buzzwords and stuff, but if you really, really believe in it and you focus on that every day, I think it's contagious. And if you do that, you tend to attract people who value that. And then amazing stuff happens. And that's happened in our organization here, Richardson Properties. And the business we started down in Manhattan Beach, a startup brokerage about 6 years ago, similar kind of core values, lots of similarities in the culture and the people. And that business has just grown tremendously. We started out with like 4 or 5 agents 5 years ago, and we have about 120 now. And so, I attribute a lot of the growth in both companies to what happened. It's never one thing, but that trip to New York and hearing those speakers, Simon Sinek, and the board experience and all of that, was tremendously helpful for me to evolve as a leader of an organization and how I thought about growth and the community, and it just kind of enhanced some things and gave me some different perspectives. So I'm as you know, a huge supporter of the chamber, and I love and appreciate the work that you do. And I think it's safe to say it's had a significant impact on my life, as I just went over.
Well, and I think one of those interesting pieces, and you and I, looking at, you were talking about, you're one of the leaders in this industry. We talked about it in the introduction of how much you're kind of valued in what you do for the industry. But you and I talked a lot, as we ran into COVID, on the, wait a minute, what's going to happen here? How are we going to do real estate? So maybe could you tell us a little bit of what that was like, how that pandemic kind of started and changed, and kind of how it changed your typical day or where we are today?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, mid-March, late March, when we went, all in the shelter at home, nobody knew what was happening. I mean, the stock market was in its free fall, and, we just didn't know what was going to happen. So there was a 30-day period where it was just, I think, shell-shocked a little bit. That being said, the focus quickly pivoted to, I don't know if I'd say an opportunity, but, we had lots of discussions in both organizations about, connecting with your clients and people in your network and checking in on them, seeing how they're doing, seeing how they're dealing with us and what they're thinking, and conveying to them that you're here and of service in any way. We certainly weren't, thinking of a real estate transaction at that point, but I think it was a huge opportunity to deepen the connection with your network and your client base and your prospect base. And that was a message that we tried to convey to our teams. And I know they embraced it and really engaged with their network. And I think that really positioned us and them well to be ready for what ultimately, turned around in the real estate market. Probably in, I'd say, June, July is when things started to heat up and transactions started to occur. So that was a focus that we had. And, we, like many companies, many of us are working from home. So, figuring out how you can still have that connection with your teams and that culture piece that, it's a lot harder to do through Zoom. So we've come up with some unique things to do, and certainly we're utilizing Zoom. And I think there's a lot of silver linings that have come out of this too. Our office meetings we have a higher attendance rate just because it's easier for people if they're, they don't have to get dressed and come into the office, they can log in. So, there's some things that I think that will continue going forward. Certainly, I think people have a thirst to have that opportunity to socialize like we did pre-COVID. So I'm looking forward to hopefully sometime soon when we can get back to that again. And then, outside the real estate market, and you and I have talked about this, like the things that we're seeing, like the parklets and the downtown. And I hear a lot about, I lived for 7 years in the downtown, and so I know it well. And I personally look at it and I see a lot of positivity and a bright future. And the parklets, drive down the street now, and it's like, why in the heck weren't we doing that before? You know, the setting down there and the ambiance. So I think, you know, there's a lot of good that's going to come out of this, and some lessons learned and some opportunities. So I know there's a lot of pain out there still, and there's, you know, companies that aren't doing well and industries that are really, you know, struggling in sectors of the economy. But I do see a lot of opportunity, and I'm optimistic. And so.
Well, it's interesting in talking about that. I mean, one of the things that, you know, I'm sure not a real estate professional, and among others probably thought was that this would absolutely destroy property values. You know, we'd be in the tank, you know, seeing incredible changes back in that, you know, where you owe more than your property's worth at this point. But it doesn't seem like that right now. Can you talk a little bit about what the residential market kind of looks like now compared to what you were seeing in January, February? Or
yeah, I think we were in a good market coming into the year, and I think people in the industry were optimistic it was going to be a good year and kind of building off of 19. And it started that way, and then obviously the whole world changed, and for, you know, two or 3 months it was unclear where we were headed. I mean, what we're seeing is a couple things. One is we're seeing more demand from the areas that we typically saw demand, Northern California and Southern California and the Central Valley. That's kind of the markets that we see people moving here from. And typically there's some sort of a connection to San Luis or Cal Poly. We're starting to see more people from those areas that really didn't have a connection. They're identifying it from a geographic standpoint. And I shared this with you the other day, Jim, that you know, it used to be, oh, you know, San Luis, great wine industry, Cal Poly's awesome, the downtown is great, weather's fantastic, beaches, hiking, but you're 3 hours from LA or 3 hours from San Francisco Bay Area. And now that but has turned into an and, because people want to be further away. So I think it's opened people's eyes to this area as a real option. And obviously that plays into what we were talking about before with the ability to work from home and that sort of stuff. That's changed things too. So we're seeing stronger demand from those places. And I think people that are here, and this is not just here, it's around the nation, because I've got, you know, broker and broker owner contacts that we're constantly checking in with around the nation and the world through some of our affiliate networks that we're in. And people are really taking a hard look at their home and how they're living in it. And obviously we're all spending a lot more time in our home. So, you know, does it have a place where I can work out? Does it have an outdoor space? Does it have an office where I can, you know, really focus and get work done? So I think people are taking a look at where they're living, and there's some movement that maybe wasn't considered pre-COVID. So that's in a nutshell what we're seeing. And the market, it's vibrant. There's not a lot of inventory. We're probably around a month and a half or two, which is lower than, you know, what people would probably term kind of healthy supply conditions. So that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, that's what I'm seeing in the residential sector.
yeah, and it definitely feels that way. You know, a lot of the folks I'm seeing kind of all over the place, feeling that same kind of, it's definitely not the 8, 9, 10, 2008, 2009, 2010 kind of a struggle of like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? It's definitely like, I feel okay in where we're at, but obviously now we're dealing with just the kind of job market. But speaking of the job market, you have, you know, besides residential, you also have, you know, commercial on your team. How is that looking, or what are you seeing kind of happening there, and any potential kind of changes or things that might be kind of on the horizon?
Well, you know, commercial retail obviously is going through a tough time. Office is as well. I'd say retail is probably a little tougher. So, you know, that's an unfortunate outcome of the pandemic. But I think even in that, there's opportunities. You know, unfortunately, if someone closes, maybe someone has a new concept. And so I think that we'll see those spaces absorb over time. I also think it's important to look at the uses in downtown and maybe zoning regulations. And, you know, the market changes, as we just seen, and it can change very quickly. We saw it change quickly in 7 and 8, and we just saw it change quickly earlier this year in a lot of ways. And so being nimble and able to, you know, for instance, maybe some office space on the second floor, maybe that could be reconceived as residential if there's not as much demand. Maybe there's some office users that would love to be in a more traditional retail ground floor space. So, you know, I think there's some opportunities there to look at the way that, you know, the zoning regulations work with the city and find some creative ways, kind of like the parklets, and have a more nimble ability to flex and stretch depending on where the market's at and how things are moving. I think that's really important, because as we're seeing, things are happening fast, and you got to be able to adapt to move forward. So I think that that's really important, and I hope that you know, the staff at the city and leadership at the city and the chamber will, you know, work together and look for those opportunities with industry people giving insight too. I think that's really important, something that will be really important now and going into the future.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation there, because yeah, as we need to be flexible and nimble, which government is not always the best at, though the city of SLO has done an amazing job during this pandemic, and hopefully that muscle memory will continue on in. But it's definitely interesting to think about how to support if there's, especially as we're looking at some potentially, we're always talking about the cost of housing in SLO. If there's some quick flips where we can reuse former sites as from commercial office and move them into residential and some of those other things, there's the potential to support retail by creating more housing right in those locations, right? I mean, in terms of making it better usage potentially.
Yeah, and I, you know, downtown, I mean, we have these two fantastic hotels, Hotel Cerro and Hotel SLO, just great assets in my opinion for the downtown. It's an amazing experience at both of them. So we have these two new assets in the downtown, and so I think building off of that, building off the parklets, and with the hotels, you have a resident downtown, albeit typically a transient type stay, but you have more residents downtown, and if we could have some more flexibility, or have flexibility in some of the zoning, and maybe look at some areas where second floor office is not, you know, the demand's weak, and maybe you could reconceive it into some studios or some loft spaces or something. And then you have a whole new product type downtown and a whole new resident downtown. And I think that keeps the downtown vibrant. Some of the housing that's come downtown is really important of all price points. I think we need housing here, and we have a fair amount of it occurring now, which is great. It's taken decades to get to this point. But we need all types of housing. We need, you know, studio rentals all the way up to, you know, high-end homes, and everything in between, of course, workforce and market rate.
Yeah, it's obviously one of the key pieces is having that availability at all levels. Because you definitely need different workers, you need different types of styles. So I think I agree with you 100%. And it's interesting. So, you know, I know you personally now, and you're not necessarily someone who would probably jump right on a pro-tax measure. So just jump in a little into some of the politics going on right around the area. You're somebody that has supported the Measure G sales tax for the city of SLO. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what was it, or is there something in there that drove you to kind of be part of that conversation or wanting to support that?
Well, I think, I guess high level, I support this community, and I support the chamber and the city. We have amazing leadership at the city staff. Derek Johnson is a great leader and doing great things with the city and kind of the vision there. And he has a council that is working really well together. I know obviously we have candidates that are up for election and all that, but setting that aside and just talking about where we have been. So generally it's to support the city and in its efforts. For me, and I might be different than others that are supporters, one of the big things that I have seen over the years is that the city has never had a funding mechanism for infrastructure. And I get a lot of comments about, well, the new development here or there and traffic, and there is traffic and there are traffic problems and things that we need to do from an infrastructure standpoint. But those new home communities that have taken 10, 15, 20 years to get through the process, they're not the problem. They're actually they're solving the problem by putting in new infrastructure that they have to do as part of their offsite improvements. The problem is there's a lot of infrastructure that the city has never had the resources to implement, that these developments can't be burdened or laden with, so much infrastructure that the projects don't make sense. So that's one big part of it for me, is that this tax measure will be able to be leveraged, bonded, and you will actually be able to do some of the big projects. The prior measures, you've been able to fix some corners and some intersections and some potholes, which is great. It's a better quality, it's a better level of service on those roadways. But we need to be able to get out there and get in front of this and really solve these transportation circulation problems that have been 2, 3, 4 decades in the making. This, in my opinion, is the first time we have an opportunity with a funding mechanism that will allow us to think big and to get in front of it. So I'm excited about that. There's other great parts of it. I'm not sure what it's being called, but the kind of micro loan program for the small businesses, I think, is fantastic. We obviously have some challenges downtown with homelessness and substance abuse and that sort of stuff. So some funding to really try to put a dent into those problems and find solutions that will benefit all in the community. So those are a few reasons that I supported. And you're right, I'm not typically a pro-tax person, especially in a pandemic. And we've heard that a lot, too. Why now? Well, when is it ever a good time? And we haven't been able to do it before. We need something. So there's not really probably ever a good time. But if we keep kicking the can down the road, I know that's not the right time. So that's why I support it. Sorry, a little bit long-winded.
No, it's really interesting. I mean, you were formerly on the chamber, but you really hit on all the things that why even in a business organization like the chamber's behind it. So it's great to hear. And again, it's part of that leadership of kind of helping make that community that we want and we want to keep here. So I appreciate your kind of perspective on that. So just real quick, if you weren't in real estate, what type of work do you think you'd be doing?
What I have thought about a lot is I would love to have been a sports agent. I don't know if that's, a couple of decades ago, I guess now, or whenever it was, seeing Jerry Maguire, maybe it wasn't quite that long ago, but, I've always been into sports, and I just, so I think that would have been a fun thing. And that's something that I've thought of that, that would have been fun to pursue, but, I ended up in real estate.
Well, I was, that's funny you said that, because I was going to go to law school to be an agent too. I thought it was going to be fun, just then passed on law school and said, forget that.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate, we're already through a half hour of this conversation. It flew right by. If someone's interested in learning more about how Richardson Properties can help them or on some of their issues that they're having, where should they start to find you guys?
I would just send them to our website, richardsonproperties.com, and my info is on there, and all of our real estate professionals are on there, and there's information about the core values that we talked about and kind of who we are and what we do and how we're different. So that would be a great place for people to log on to if they're interested in learning more.
And I'll give a personal plug, since I was a client. His team does have the values that they share that he talked about. So an amazing group. So then we always end with one question. What are you looking forward to this weekend?
Well, I just moved into a new house, and I'm one of those people that I was describing that kind of took inventory on where I was living and what I had and didn't have and kind of what I wanted and stuff. So I'm going to be unpacking a lot of boxes and trying to stay cool, but I'm looking forward to getting through that and having hopefully a relaxing weekend with the amazing weather as it starts to cool down a little bit, it sounds like. So I'm looking forward to that and just some R&R this weekend.
Well, Well, certainly good luck on the unpacking boxes since I just finished all that. Painful, but enjoy. So Chris, thanks so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you here and talk about some of these key issues hitting our community. And certainly we appreciate your leadership that you've lent for the years that you've been here. And thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been fun, and the 30 minutes went by felt like 5 minutes. So it was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks so much.
All right.
So for all of you out there, thanks so much for eating lunch with us. We hope to see you next week when we're joined by Kim Bishop to talk about journalism, the election, and teaching remotely. So if you have an idea for a future working lunch guest or someone you want to learn more about, send us an email at slochamber@slochamber.org. We appreciate you tuning in. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Stay cool, healthy, and safe out there. Have a good one.